And with that, that's all the housekeeping I had for you today. Welcome and thank you once again. But with all the housekeeping wrapped up, I'll pass it on over to Scott.
Great. Thanks very much, Amy. The goal of today is to demystify how hackers hack, the methodologies they use, the tools they leverage, and how you can protect your business from these evolving threats. My name is Scott Krensman. I'm president of CMIT Solutions of Boston, Newton, and Waltham. And today I brought with me a longtime cybersecurity partner, Barracuda, to speak with you today. Let me pass it over to the Barracuda team to introduce themselves. John, do you want to go first?
Absolutely. Hey, Scott. Hey, everyone. Thanks so much for joining today. My name is John Danino. I lead up the sales engineering team here at Barracuda, specifically around the XDR solution. Super excited to be here. We got some really interesting content. I'll be running through some hacking demonstrations, so we should have some fun there, but look forward to it. Pat?
Awesome. Thanks for that, John. And Pat O'Connell, I'm a regional account director here at Barracuda, specifically focused on the XDR solution. Work closely with Scott and CMIT as well as John to bring the XDR solution to the market and help protect our customers. Looking forward to today's presentation. Back to you, Scott.
Great. Thanks, Pat. So who is CMIT? Well, we deliver full service outsourced IT to SMBs from 5 to 500 people. We have a special focus in cybersecurity and compliance, things like HIPAA, FINRA, DoD, et cetera. And as part of a franchise system, our clients get the best of both worlds. You get an intimate, personalized service on a local level with the breadth and depth of enterprise class product solutions and pricing from national providers like Barracuda. So what does that mean? How is CMIT different? Well, as I said just a second ago, you get that personalized service. You get the local right with you. We're here right around the corner, able to work closely with you, a trusted, reliable partner. You get this best-in-class support. Now, you get our local team, but you also get the extension of our national team as well as our vendors. So that's over 800 plus technicians. Let me tell you, we've seen it all across the entire spectrum. We can apply that to whatever situation is going on in your particular operation. We are able to deliver tailored solutions to you that are customized. This is not cookie cutter, one size fits all. We're able to make a solution that works for you and your business. And we give you straightforward advice, just like how I'm talking to you right now, regardless of how complex and things like cybersecurity. So you'll see some of that in our presentation today. And we're also able to help simplify purchasing for you. One-stop shop. We have volume buying and we're able to get things at great price and be able to deliver that to you very easily. So it just simplifies your process. Pat, let me turn it over to you for a little bit about Barracuda.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. So Barracuda, we've been around for, we just celebrated our 20-year anniversary. So where we help protect people, data, apps, and networks of more than 250,000 organizations worldwide. So we collaborate very closely with CMIT, and there's actually over 1,900 people employed by Barracuda, whose job is to protect their customers for life. So one of the ways that we do that is by supplying innovative products through CMIT that are easy to buy, easy to deploy. And the nice part is that they're very easy to use because we manage the entire process for CMIT's small to medium-sized businesses. So we have a very comprehensive and focused security solutions that we have, and you'll see why that's important in a slide or two. But we provide organizations with email security, network and cloud applications, data protection, security-centric remote management tools, and the newest component to our portfolio, which is Managed XDR. And for those that don't know the acronym, it stands for Extended Detection and Response. That's part of our 24/7, 365 SOC operations. Another acronym to throw at you, it's Security Operations Center, which you'll learn a little bit about. So that means to small and medium-sized businesses is that we have a team of cybersecurity experts monitoring your network from one pane of glass, regardless of what cybersecurity solutions they're using from CMIT. Now, obviously, we're here to say nice things about Barracuda, but it's also nice when other organizations say nice things about us. So on the right-hand side there, you can see on your screen, you'll see some of the journals that track and follow the cybersecurity industry. And we've been recognized multiple times by these organizations as providing enterprise-grade solutions, specifically for the SMBs that we help support. But the big problem and the big question that we always get asked on our side, right, is why is cybersecurity a hard problem to solve, right? They see government spending hundreds of millions of dollars on the problem. They also question, why are there so many smart people working on this problem? And of course, it only seems to be getting worse instead of better. You know, you could even see Scott and I talking about the MGM instance before, right? A huge organization which has a lot of security parameters and a lot of great security solutions in there, but it's always not 100%. What I also like to tell them, right, there's two reasons why this current state of affairs of cybersecurity, there's a lot of smart people working on the problem, but there's essentially not enough of them. And as you can see on this slide here, a big problem is the global shortage of talent. Just looking at North America alone, right, over 400,000 jobs went unfulfilled in 2021. And as we look at 2023, I'm sure the number will be even more. So there's just really not enough talent out there. And when I say talent, I'm talking about the individuals with fingers on the keyboard experience who have worked on very sophisticated cyber attacks in the past. So that the only option for a small to medium-sized business who doesn't have access to this talent would be to work with an organization like CMIT who collaborates with Barracuda to provide that talent. Now, you always got to have a cybersecurity landscape slide, right? The other reason for the tremendous increase in cyber attacks, along with the lack of talent, is the landscape. The landscape's continuously changing, right? And there's no need to go back to the past, but there's plenty enough going on in 2021 to 2023 to talk about. But just to recap it quickly, right? You look at 2000 to 2007, right? Attackers have gone from being intrusive and annoying to disruptive. You know, I was actually talking with the founder of ours for a solution that we acquired a few years back, where he was actually an attacker back in the early 2000s. And what he said it wasn't really about money. It was really more about pride. And as you've seen over time, that's become very much a way to monetize, right? Attackers have actually figured out how to monetize those efforts. So then we get into 2014, right? They actually started to become disruptive with the access to the Internet of Things, right? The Internet continuously expanded. Cyber attacks becoming really a costly and sometimes business-ending event for a lot of organizations. And then 2022, we saw the growth of Internet of Everything in 2022, which dramatically changed with the use of Internet of Everything. So now I'm the first one to admit that the Internet is a powerful tool that makes us more efficient and it allows us to communicate more effectively, but it allows us to establish a larger footprint for our organization. Companies can now go global from an office in Toronto with the use of the Internet. And the problem is, as we business people look at the Internet as a critical business tool, hackers now see it as an opportunity to break into your business. And John's going to get into that a little bit later on the presentation with some of the demonstrations that he has. And then 2022 and beyond, right, we look at how attacks can now become colossal, right? A lot of you have probably heard about AI, ChatGPT, right? Those are extremely compelling for other organizations, but it opens up a whole new world for cyber thugs to take advantage of and further evolve their approach. We can expect the impact of these evolutions of attacks to be colossal. And I'm really not sure what's bigger than that. So if you go look at the Verizon breach report, they have a very eye-opening statistic there. They quote that 60% of the SMBs that are hacked go out of business in the next 12 months. So what do we do, and how do we approach this problem? So when we look at it, right, many small and medium-sized businesses are under the impression that hackers will not spend any time attacking their business because they're, well, too small. The opposite is actually true. When you look at the statistics of this, 60% of cyber attacks actually target small businesses. Hackers know that small businesses have not implemented basic safeguards to protect themselves from an attack. And actually, a lot of times use smaller businesses as practice, right, to get to a situation where they can impact an organization like MGM. So as a result, the hackers use the same methods of hacking a business repeatedly. And what we see is that more than 99% of all attacks are similar and are trying to attack you one of three ways. First one being confidentiality, second is integrity, and the third one's availability. So with confidentiality, they're trying to steal your identity. For example, a hacker will trick your employee into giving them their password through a phishing email, for example, something I'm sure a lot of people have seen. Number two is integrity, right? They'll try and execute something on your machine or network. For example, they'll breach the integrity of your network by executing the attack in the form of malware or advanced persistent threat. And lastly, the third one, availability. They'll attack your availability, or in other words, prevent you from accessing your systems and information. For example, the hacker will attack the availability of your data, typically called ransomware, which I'm sure everyone on this call has heard of. So let's get into, what does an attacker do, right? What does an attack look like? I'm going to go show you how our hackers access your system, right? Which is the main reason why institutions like NIST, right, recommend a layered framework for cybersecurity. You need to have several different technologies and processes in place to protect your organization. So hackers will start off by sending an email. And for those that don't know, actually, 93% of successful breaches start with an email. Your first line of defense is an email protection solution designed to stop malicious emails from being delivered to your employee's mailbox. So if you're not using one, then that invites the hackers to go to the next step. And the email is delivered to your employee's inbox, right? Or even your inbox. And again, if you're not using something on the desktop in the form of an antivirus, that could create a problem because your employee may either click on a link, open an attachment, or respond to a malicious email. In this case, the employee clicked on what they thought was a resume for the controller job and detonated on their endpoint, which is just a fancy word for their laptop, desktop, cell phone, or whatever the case may be. And once that detonates, that software just landed on the desktop will start doing what it's designed to do. Now, that was your second chance to stop the potential problem. And then in this case, that malware will quickly migrate from employee desktop to employee desktop and onto your network. So this is the third chance to catch a potential problem. Because the first thing that the software is going to do or want to do is communicate with the hacker. In this case, it will actually send a message to the hacker saying that it was successfully migrated to the network. We call that command and control communication. And then that hacker sees that it has been successfully launched on the network, and it will send an encryption key to lock up the data. And as we said earlier, we all know this as ransomware. And in this case, not only has it detonated and launched ransomware, but before it even launches, the ransomware the hacker has actually elevated their privileges. And this is now the fourth time that CMIT could have alerted you to a problem, because what we offer is the ability to see that software trying to elevate its privilege so that it can access your most critical data. So you can see employee customer data, processes that you use, proprietary information, right? Anything that they can exfiltrate and send to the dark web for resale, and in turn, tarnish your brand and reputation. And now in this case, the hacker privileges were elevated. They exfiltrated the data to the dark web, and this hacker starts locking up your data. And again, this is the fourth time that we have stopped this from happening, because CMIT will have been able to see the escalation of privileges. Now, wait a minute. What is Dan in sales doing in the Active Directory server? Or why is he looking at employee information? He doesn't have access to this stuff, right? Those are certain things that would pop up and for us to be able to see. So we'll see it, we alert on it, then we stop it. And this is why a layered approach is the preferred method to stop a cybersecurity incident from turning into a breach. So what I'd like to do next is look at what actually good looks like from a cybersecurity hygiene aspect. And Scott, you can start this one off if you don't mind.
Yeah, great. Thanks, Pat. So to protect your organization from attackers, what can we do about it? Let me start off by taking you through these first couple of steps on cyber hygiene. Step one is establish what you want to protect. What are the data and systems that you care about? This is where a well thought out incident response plan and disaster recovery plan comes into play in determining that very critical first piece, which is what is establishing what is most important to you and your organization, your data, your assets, your processes, etc. Step two then becomes building concentric rings of security around your data. But the key there is you got to know where your data is. Have you thought that through? So you want to make sure you have an in-depth defense strategy by building these concentric rings of security around the things you care about, which you've established already in step one. You know, some people call this the cyber kill chain. As a baseline, most organizations have steps 1 and steps 2 covered. And if you're with us at CMIT, you are covered. But how quickly the threat landscape is evolving, organizations need to move from step 2 into steps 3, 4, and 5 in order to protect themselves from disaster. I'm going to invite Pat to talk a little more on those.
Appreciate it. And, you know, you really can't get to the steps 3 through 5 without actually having steps 1 and 2, right? And when you're able to accomplish steps 1 and 2, that's when you can move into 3, which is actually most overlooked by a lot of small and medium-sized businesses. And that's monitoring your environment, right? Monitoring that environment on a 24/7 basis, where you won't see that ransomware. If you're not doing that, I should say, you won't be able to see ransomware lying dormant for 6 months and then suddenly waking up and reaching out to the hacker to pull out an encryption key. You won't see the exfiltration of data with a lot of valuable information. The only way you can guard against that is having someone with eyes on a single pane of glass, monitoring that system 24/7, 365. And looking back at yourself, right? What are you currently doing today to monitor that environment on a 24/7 basis? If someone had a successful brute force on a firewall at 2 a.m. in the morning, are you going to be able to see that? Are you going to see it when you walk into the office at 8 a.m. and they've already had 6 hours there to move around your network? Or would you find out about it a month later? Those are things to think about, right? What are you currently doing to monitor that environment on a 24/7 basis? Or is that something that you need help with? When you're able to monitor that environment on a 24/7 basis with having people having their eyes on it, the 4th step comes into reducing down that response time. Reducing down the response time is key into remediating an attack, right? And that's where the quicker we can see an anomalous behavior on your network or on your endpoint, for example, which is your desktop, as we learned earlier, the faster CMIT can react and fix the problem before it becomes a problem. If we're able to reduce, or if we're able to monitor the environment on a 24/7 basis, as well as reduce down the response time, we can then build a framework around people, process, and technology. And that's where the last step comes in, right? Step 5. It's where cybersecurity was a technology problem. We'd all buy the right technology and put ourselves out of business. It's really a 3-step approach. You have to secure your people, provide some security awareness training for your employees, for example. You need to look at your processes again. And if you're using a hardened passwords, are you actively patching all of your software applications on a regular basis? Are you using the best practices when it comes to requesting a wire transfer to be executed, for example? And lastly, it's the technology you deploy. But most importantly, it's where you're getting that technology from. There's a lot of good companies out there that can provide technology, but you want to buy it from a trusted vendor like CMIT who knows your business inside and out. And that's an overview of that. And I think we have a poll coming up.
Absolutely. So we have arrived at our first poll. So I'm going to go ahead and launch. So you should see it coming up on your screen. We just touched on your cybersecurity hygiene for business. So now we're curious, how do you feel about your organization's cyber hygiene? The answer choices are fantastic, good, could be better, or I'd like some help. So I'll leave it up here for a few seconds. It seems like most folks are selecting good, so that is some good news, but it's a type other personnel are adding in could be better. We're getting a fantastic. All right, I'll leave it open for 5 more seconds. It seems like most people have answered, so get your answer in. All right, I'll go ahead and end the poll and share the results on the screen. As mentioned, most people have answered good, 10 out of 13 of you, followed by could be better, followed by fantastic. All right, and I'll pass it back on over.
Awesome. Thanks so much. Really interesting poll results there. So I'm going to start off by talking about the top SMB threats. So one of the very first ones we'll cover here, followed up by a demo shortly, is business email compromise. So this happens to be the most cost-effective way for attackers to gain access to your systems. It costs pretty much next to nothing to craft an email to socially engineer someone clicking on a link and deploying things like ransomware, which we'll also do a quick demo on. In fact, I think there's actually so many. I might be confusing it with another one, but I believe the MGM one happened via social engineering. I think it was the attackers calling into the help desk and having the password reset. So social engineering, really interesting one to get a hold of. The next up, we have ransomware, right? Pat's been talking about that a little bit here. So ransomware, of course, is specifically designed to encrypt your data, forcing you to pay a sum of money in order to retrieve that data. And of course, with this, there really is no guarantee, and it can spread like wildfire. So again, we'll take a look at that live in action in just a few moments here. And then lastly, moving to the cloud. So of course, with a hybrid and remote workforce, this is really pushing folks to move everything over from on-premise, from those on-premise appliances up into the cloud. And businesses really need to build a perimeter around the office, or they used to be able to build a perimeter around the office. And now, of course, with folks not working full-time in the office, this is where that hybrid workforce comes in, and we need to start looking at things both on and off premise. All right. So diving into those a little bit further here, business email compromise. So this is a type of cybercrime where an attacker will send what appears to be a legitimate email, maybe from the quote unquote CEO or a trusted vendor, somebody else that's trusted maybe within the organization. And this is in order to trick the recipient into taking action on behalf of the attacker, such as wiring money to a fraudulent account, as one example. So what is needed to execute a phishing attack? It's actually quite simple. It's really 4 steps here. So create a phishing website using an open source tool, sending a phishing email from a legitimate email address, or what appears to be legitimate. Number 3, capturing those credentials. And finally, logging into the target account. And typically what we see quite often with compromised accounts is creating what's called an email forwarding rule. And we'll see exactly what that looks like. So let's get into the demo. I'll go ahead and bring up my lab environment here. And what we're going to do is bring up one of those tools. So this is a phishing tool on the left side here. And then I've also pre-crafted an email. We'll get to that in just a second, but you can see it's sort of like a menu. It's really quite easy. So for example, I know that the person that I'm attacking here is using Microsoft. So I'm just going to select option 4 for Microsoft. I'll put in a few additional parameters here. And what this tool is doing is generating a link for me. So I will copy that link. And again, you can see I've pre-crafted an email. I'm going to highlight the verify your identity text and then paste that in as a hyperlink to kind of hide that. And then I will put in the email address of our victim. And you can see I'm doing another common tactic here is creating a sense of urgency. So, I've made it look official. I have the Microsoft logo in there. I say it's from the Microsoft account team, the security team. And I've wrote here that we think someone has accessed your Microsoft account. When this happens, we need you to verify your identity, right? So a lot of folks are going to get kind of nervous about this and want to, sort of fix any potential issues. So we'll go ahead and send that off to our victim. And what we'll do here is switch over to the view of the victim so we can kind of see both sides, the attacker view as well as the victim view. So you can see our victim does get that email. Okay, looks pretty legitimate. Says it's from Microsoft Verify. It's got the logo in there, right? This may fool a large majority of folks. So if we click on that link, it's going to bring us to a sign-in page. And this looks nearly identical to the real Microsoft login page. So our victim here, Jack, is going to enter in his email address as well as the password. And click sign in. Okay, so looks like it's talking about account recovery. Now, of course, that was a fake page. And if we head back to the view of the attacker, you can actually see what that page was doing. So it transmitted those credentials back over to us. You can see we have the email address there as well as the password. So as you can imagine, this is where I could start causing some damage, or the attacker that is. So we can go to the real Microsoft sign-in page, put in Jack's email address here. And then we'll also put in the password. All right. And just like that, we're in. So again, typically the very first thing that an attacker will do when they get access to the account is head over to forwarding, enable forwarding. And what's happening here is the attacker is putting in their Gmail address or their some other email, and any email that is addressed to Jack is also going to be forwarded over to Hector the Hacker's Gmail address here. And we could even customize some more settings, like deleting the original email from the victim's inbox, so that way they never even see it come through. In this case, for this demo, we'll just keep it pretty stock here. And now I'll actually show you this in action. So I've switched over to a third account. This is Sam's account. In this sort of fictitious example here, Sam is a colleague of Jack. And Sam is sending a totally legitimate email. It's addressed to Jack. It's about some wire transfer instructions. You could see it has a PDF there. And we'll send that off. So remember, that was addressed for Jack. But if I switch back to the view of the attacker, right, Hector the Hacker's view, you can see that came through into his inbox. So we have the full message here. We even have the PDF attachment. So you can kind of see the problems that this could cause. Right now, you have someone like Pat was talking about, maybe months and months just sitting back watching all those email messages go back and forth, intercept those wire transfers, gain more information about the organization, and perform an even bigger attack. So, and Scott, I think you have a pretty interesting story about business email compromise for the audience.
Yeah, well, it happens to be right on the same points that everything that you were talking about precisely. Not too long ago, a good client who originally chose not to sign up for higher levels of cybersecurity had a situation where the CFO received what was a direct email from the CEO in the same look, style, and frame as what their internal emails look like. And in fact, it really was an internal email, because the hacker, like John had just described, had somehow got access to their Microsoft 365 instance, turned off the logging, turned off the copying of emails internally, so that you knew what was going on. And the hacker, had been scanning the environment for some time prior and knew who was who. And they requested a couple of $100,000 wire transfer be sent to the account of their choosing. And the CFO went back and forth via email with the CEO to try to confirm the details. Do you really want to do this, Mr. CEO? Yes, was the response. Is this the right account? Oh, yes, that's the right account. Not knowing, there's no log in the actual account anymore of this happening. And, it's just going on blindly. Luckily, if it wasn't for the CFO's final validation by deciding to make an actual cell phone call to the CEO, that stopped the fraud in its place. But it got all the way to the penultimate step of saying, go with the transfer. So very scary. So that's the story. John, do you have some best practices you want to leave people with on email compromise?
Yeah, absolutely. A really interesting story, something that's really, unfortunately, very common. But luckily, we're going to go through a few cybersecurity best practice steps here that sort of everyone can take home with them and maybe start doing today, or at least thinking about. So one is using MFA, or what's called multi-factor authentication. You might also see this as 2FA, two-factor authentication, as well as a strong password. So of course, a strong password is obvious. For folks that are not familiar with MFA or 2FA, that's going to be a secondary piece of information that's needed to actually sign into the account. So you put in your username, you put in your password, but then you'll also need typically a 6-digit code that's unique and is constantly changing. And there are various methods of MFA in terms of security. So just keep that in mind, but that would be step one. Another one is implementing an AI-based phishing protection solution. So social engineering is becoming a very big problem, like we just talked about. And really the policy-based spam filters are not super smart enough to really determine the new forms of business email compromise attacks. So implementing a real more advanced solution using artificial intelligence, that's really going to be your next best step. Something that's actually like reading the email and looking at the intent, because folks, of course, they're still sending links like we just showed. They're also sending attachments, but they're also sending plain text emails where it's just saying, "Hey, it's your manager. I'm in a meeting right now. I need you to go to Target and get me some gift cards, and then text me the code." Right? There was nothing malicious inside of that email. There was no link or attachment, but the intent of it was very suspicious. Right? People shouldn't be asking for gift card codes, right? To text to a random number. Next up, we have configuring DMARC. So DMARC, long story short, is basically a critical tool to prevent attackers from spoofing your domain. So, like spoofing Microsoft or spoofing acmeinc.com or something like that. You should be the only one that's authorized to send mail from your particular domain or email server. Enhanced filtering, so content filtering, image identification, right? Kind of like I just saw in that demo. I just put in some random Microsoft logos in there. So you should have a solution that's kind of looking and saying, does Microsoft really use that particular logo in their emails? Probably not. End user security awareness training. So that saying of you're only as strong as your weakest link definitely applies here. So you might have the best firewall, the most advanced spam filter, which is all great, right? That's part of the process here. But untrained end users can really create an opening for attackers to gain access. So you can lock all the doors, but if someone just comes on by and unlocks it and lets them in, then it kind of goes out the window at that point. And then data protection, right? Sort of a wrapper up at the end there. So understanding where your data is, like Scott was talking about, implementing a process, a multi-step process, or defense in depth to protect all that, backups, things like that. It's pretty good to keep in mind. And then in the top right corner there, the 5 steps to stop phishing. Keep this in mind. Don't click links, open attachments unless you know they're safe. You were expecting them. Check the from address, right? Did it really come from Microsoft.com or did it come from a different domain? Look for poor images or spelling or grammar mistakes, things like that. Those are usually a pretty good dead giveaway. You can verify the sender over another medium. Goes back to Scott's story before, right? Picking up the cell phone and giving a call. And then getting layers of protection, right? So we talked a little bit about that so far. We're going to get even more as we go a little bit deeper here, but definitely defense in depth. There really is, like Pat said, no one solution, one thing that can kind of fix all of this, all of these problems. All right, so up to the second point here, which is ransomware. So along with business email compromise, ransomware is super common. I'm going to take a wild guess and say almost everybody on today's webinar has at least heard about ransomware, right? Also at the beginning, we were talking about MGM and how they got hit by it. And they're definitely not the only ones. Every day, unfortunately, folks are getting hit with it. So let's dive a little bit deeper. I like to go through the stages of ransomware because it's easy to just say, oh yeah, it encrypts everything. And it does, right? But sort of what happens, what leads up to the encryption, there's actually multiple steps. So first and foremost, the attacker is going to infiltrate the organization in some way, shape, or form, whether that's through a phishing email or maybe just an end user going to a site that they shouldn't and picking up something that they shouldn't download that way. Next, once the attacker gains access into the network, they typically sit there and collect information. This could be an advanced persistent threat, for example. Finally, when the time is right, the attacker is going to pounce on the victim. They're going to move laterally, maybe to another device or machine, move their way through the network to ultimately execute that malware. And once that malware is installed, the ransomware is effectively on that machine. The attacker might encrypt it instantaneously, or they might set a date and time for that to deploy. The reason attackers might wait a little bit is they don't want to tip anybody off. They don't want to sound the alarm bells. They kind of want to get on all the systems and then detonate it all at once. And then the communication to the command and control server. Pat talked a little bit about that before when we were talking about what hackers do. And then finally, the encryption. So this is the scary part, right? This is where all of the files become encrypted, and they demand the ransom, right? They want you to pay $50,000, $100,000, $1 million in Bitcoin sometimes. And it can be quite devastating, right? And just because you pay doesn't mean you're always going to get that encryption key to unlock that data. And even at that point, they have the data and they're probably going to sell it on the dark web anyway. So, having something in place to prevent this from happening in the first place, that's really the best case scenario. So now for the fun part, looking at ransomware. So I'll bring up another test machine here. So with this, we have, or we're going to run sort of a little story here. So let's say I'm an attacker. I'm going to go around and look for some information on a particular org. So I'm going to go to their website and I'm going to visit laxtex.net. I see here that Adam Jones is the head of sales. I got his phone number and his email. And from here, I'm going to use a tool. This is a email spoofing tool. And you can see the from address. I'm going to make it Office 365. The from address is noreply@microsoft.com. And I will paste in Mr. Jones's email address there. I have a subject line of urgent. Your mailbox is full. If you don't fix this, you're not going to be receiving any more emails in your inbox, right? Again, creating a sense of urgency. And I will also go to my documents folder and put an attachment on this email. So you can see here it's Office 365 instructions.pdf. We'll keep an eye on that. That'll become a key point here in just a second. And the email is sent off. So, this is one way of doing it. I could also just use Gmail like I did before, but kind of showing all the different ways that attackers can kind of carry out this stuff. Okay, so again, we're switching over to the view of the victim. You can see I am on Adam Jones's PC here. And if we head over to this PC, you can see I do have a shared drive on here. So there's a reason I'm showing you this. Basically, there's a server on this network, right? Organizations sometimes use file servers, totally normal. You can see I have some documents in the share folder. And here is the server, right? So totally separate machine. It's on the same network, but it's a totally separate machine. It's a file server, and that's how I'm seeing those files on Adam Jones's PC. So again, basically setting the stage here. This is how a lot of organizations have things configured. So here we'll pull up the email client, and Adam gets the email. It says it's from Microsoft. Okay. Well, I want to fix this issue. I want to be able to receive emails. I don't want any disruptions. So let me go ahead and download that PDF. Looks pretty harmless. And we'll go ahead and open that. Okay, so I have an error here when opening that PDF. Interesting. And if I look at the left side of my screen, some of my icons are now just sort of blank files. So that's interesting. Now, obviously, I'm playing a little along here. This is obviously ransomware. It wasn't a legitimate PDF file. So you can see we have the ransomware note telling us that our files are encrypted. We have to pay $20,000 in Bitcoin. And you can see here, I pulled up that shared drive, that server that's hosting my files, and even those are encrypted. So that's pretty interesting. But the reason this happens is because ransomware does move laterally throughout the network. And I could try and open up these files here, but we'll just give that a second. Obviously, it's not going to be possible. That's the whole point of encryption. So there we go, right? Can't open those documents. So if we actually head back over to the file server, you can see the same exact ransom note is on this machine as well. And all this is totally encrypted as well. Because again, the ransomware spread throughout the entire network. Just because it's on one PC doesn't mean it's going to stay there. It's going to try and move to all of them. So, you know, pretty crazy stuff, right? Maybe this is the first time some of the audience has seen ransomware in action, but you can see how devastating it is, how quickly it can spread as well. Scott, I believe you have another interesting story to tell.
Yeah, I was just going to bring up something that people around here may have heard about, you know, while it's from a large local company, and I'm just going to repeat a little bit of what you said earlier. It's important to realize, you know, some of these bigger stories we hear about because they make the press and it affects a lot of people. But when it affects small to medium businesses, you don't hear about it as much because it's not affecting a lot of people. But as Pat illustrated earlier, you know, the data suggests 60% of SMBs that are affected by ransomware don't survive 6 months after the attack. You know, don't let that be you. So what's the story? Back here in late March, Harvard Pilgrim Healthcare, our local insurer, was infiltrated. Now, they were infiltrated in March and towards the end of March, but we didn't hear about it until April 17th. Why? Well, because they were doing their reconnaissance, lateral movement, and the malware deployment over a 3-week period inside their network, totally unchecked. And then they decided the right time was April 17th to pull the switch and start the malware officially in the process. And that's when it all went bad from Harvard Pilgrim's perspective, or when it was visible. Over 2.5 million records were stolen. And, you know, again, just as John was saying, you know, while eventually they were able to recover things, and it took over 8 weeks and they still weren't fully recovered, but that data is still out in the hacker universe and being resold to other people. So, you know, as this old saying goes, an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure, truly comes to play when dealing with issues like ransomware. And now, John, do you have some best practices for us?
I do. Yeah. So sort of piggybacking off what you just stated there, prevention, right? And some of the ways to do that. Number one would be deploying a strong endpoint protection solution, preferably deploying a next generation endpoint security solution, and one that's going to leverage AI and machine learning to sort of pick up and prevent those threats. Next is making sure all of your systems are patched and up to date. I think that's kind of a, you know, an obvious one, but it is a very good best practice. Blocking malicious IP addresses. So using tools such as content filters and firewalls, you can not only block IP addresses, but entire regions using geofencing features. Similar to before, again, a strong password policy. Some of these are new, some of these are kind of what we've, you know, heard over the years, but still should be implemented nonetheless. And user security awareness training again, right? Should we be clicking on particular emails or attachments or things like that? And then data protection strategy. So data protection really comes into play when we talk about things like ransomware. Yes, we should be preventing it from happening in the first place, right? Because once they get it, it's kind of out there in most cases. But at least as a fallback, if it does happen, having good, solid, segmented backups. I think that's the key there, because sometimes folks take backups, but they're on the same network or not segmented from everything else, and then those get encrypted as well, right? The attackers are smart; they know to go after those backups. Yeah, so that's really key. Just good data protection.
All right, we've arrived at our final poll. So I'll go ahead and launch it on your screen. You should see it pop up. But our last and final poll is, do you currently have an incident response plan in place in case of a breach? The answer selections are yes, no, no, but I'd like some help, and I'm not sure. So far, most people have been responding with yes. We got about 50% with yes. A lot of some I'm not sures. So we'll give it another few seconds. Make sure to get your answer selection in. This is your last chance to be able to be eligible to win some swag. So certainly get your answers in if you haven't already. But I'll go ahead and close the poll in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right. And again, it seems like most folks do have a incident response plan in place. About 67% of you said yes, followed by I'm not sure and no. So thank you for providing that feedback. And I'll pass it back to John.
Thank you. So in partnership with CMIT, we're looking to establish visibility into as many aspects of a business security environment as possible by integrating 24/7, 365 monitoring. That goes across network, endpoints, email, servers, cloud infrastructure, right? There's a lot of these disparate systems out there. And with the Barracuda XDR solution in partnership with CMIT, we're able to offer that cohesive security solution. So Barracuda XDR, or Extended Detection and Response, provides extended visibility, analysis, and response across those various systems, and the ones you can see on the screen here. Whether it's firewalls with network security, Office 365 environments with XDR Cloud, Windows and Linux servers with XDR Server Security, email security. Of course, Barracuda has been doing email for 20 years now. But also third parties as well, because we're an open XDR platform, in addition to endpoint security, right? So similarly to how we were talking about best practices, and a next generation endpoint protection solution is also key in all of this. So combining all of this together, and the best way I like to describe this, using an analogy, is either like a puzzle. So there's all these different puzzle pieces, all of this different data, these logs from these systems, bringing them all together into a single pane of glass. Or another analogy can be like an investigator, right? So you're investigating a crime and you want all of the clues from that crime, maybe the footprints or the fingerprints or an article of clothing that was left behind. Those are all clues. And it works in a very similar way with a solution like Barracuda XDR, where we're bringing all of those clues together, and combining both the detection and prevention.
So, thank you, John. So we will be entering everybody in attendance here into a draw to win 1 of 5 complimentary cyber health assessments valued at over $1,500 to help identify threats and gaps in your own environments and give you counsel as to how to remediate and protect against these kinds of issues, business email compromise and ransomware and all the cybersecurity components. So this is a compliment of me and my team here at CMIT, and if you win, we'll be in touch to schedule some time with you. And even if you don't win an assessment as part of the raffle, I'm here to help with any of your questions, and would be happy to book a one-on-one consultation with you. I think we're on the next slide, John. About your organization's cybersecurity needs. We've helped many SMBs with their cyber insurance questionnaires, incident response plans, ransomware strategies, and so much more. My team would be happy to help, and you've got my contact information on the screen. In addition, as you see in the graphic there, we're also going to send out a copy of our Don't Pay the Ransom ebook, which is a 3-step guide to ransomware protection to everybody in attendance today. So keep an eye out for that. That should be there by the end of the day today. And let me pass it over to Amy. We ran a little long, but we'd be happy to take some questions now.
Yeah, absolutely. It looks like we have about 5 minutes left, so we'll certainly open it up for some Q&A. So just as a reminder, we do have the Q&A function at the bottom of your screen. Feel free to throw any questions from today's content in there. It does look like we have one currently. The question is, how often are hacker groups caught and prosecuted?
Boy, that's a great question, and we are not really on that side of the equation. It does happen, but infrequently. More often than not, they're interstate, and it becomes more of a federal issue. It's not really done locally. So, and in many cases, it's international in a real origin. That doesn't mean it doesn't happen domestically, but the ability to actually capture people is very challenging. I don't know if you guys have any specific data on that fact.
Yeah, not particularly. There's really no central database that tracks this information. However, it's estimated that really only a small fraction of hacker groups are ever caught, let alone prosecuted at that point. But yeah, there's really no central database for it.
Yeah, looks like Joe threw some info in the chat. It says only 5% of cyber criminals are apprehended for their crimes, which demonstrates just how challenging it is for agencies to arrest and prosecute these offenders.
Yeah, very low.
Yep, absolutely. All right, the second question is, how often does the hacker come from within the organization?
Well, so there's intentional and unintentional of sorts. So let's talk a little bit about the unintentional. You know, that's the phishing protection. That's how people get in a lot of the time. There's a lot of human error involved in this, between the social engineering, as John was talking about what happened at MGM, where, geez, the help desk didn't have good protocols for protecting their clients and allowed a hacker to imitate as if they were a real employee or somebody appropriate to get service, and was able to penetrate that way. So there's that kind of access, and then the raw percentage of what happens outside of the organization. Well, you know, that's pretty high too, where people do these brute force attacks, but really it's a combination of a brute force with a human element, either socially engineered or just good random casting a wide net, which is what these phishers do. It's not like they're targeting mom and pop's soda company. They don't care about that, but they care that you care about it, and they know that it's important to you. Pat or John, do you have any additional thoughts on this?
Yeah, we typically quote the Verizon data breach investigation report. It's actually quite an interesting report. And they found that insider threats accounted for 25% of data breaches. Now that number is from 2022. So it might have changed a little bit there, but basically means that 1 out of 4 data breaches, the attacker is someone who's already having access to the organization's systems or data. Yep.
Great.
John, I think a good question to ask too. A lot of people think they're all set with MFA. Can you talk a little bit to how attackers can get around MFA?
Yeah, that's a really good question. So remember, there are different types of multi-factor authentication that's out there. A few of them could be SMS based, right? So text message based. That's typically the least desirable form of MFA. just because SMS is really not known for security, right? Unencrypted. There's also things called SIM swapping. This is very, very popular right now. In fact, there was someone who had all their cryptocurrency stolen from their account because they were using SMS-based 2FA. The attacker calls up, Verizon or T-Mobile or AT&T and says, "Hey, I'm this person. I need a new SIM card." And they transfer that number over to a SIM card that the attacker has, and now they get that 2FA SMS code. Then there's others like TOTP based, and this is probably what most folks are familiar with, or at least that's where the industry is going, where you download an app on your phone and you scan a QR code and you get those changing codes every 30 seconds or so. That's much more desirable than SMS. And then you also have things like physical security keys that you can plug into a USB port. That's considered probably one of the more secure ones because it's something you physically have. But there are definitely ways around all of that, right? SIM swapping, like I just mentioned, TOTP based codes can be phished. So that's not to say do not use MFA. Absolutely. Everybody here should have those on all of their accounts, both personal and work related. But just realize that there are different forms out there, and there's also many ways to still get around those. Very uncommon, but still possible with a determined attacker. So having some monitoring in place is going to be key for something like that. Really good question, Pat.
Thanks.
Great. Thanks.